I welcome everybody. I always enjoy starting these webinars and looking at the participant list, and it's great to see so many people join us and see so many old friends. And I particularly want to acknowledge Tony Fiorillo. So I haven't seen Tony for so long, so thanks for joining us. Anyway, it's great to have everybody here. And anyway, I think this is these webinars have been very informative and really helpful for us, and hopefully they're helpful for the community. So today's speakers are Katya Kontar. She's with the International Global Change Science, she is the International Global Change Science Lead at the U.S. Global Change Research Program in the National Coordinating Office. And me, I'm Larry Hinsman. I'm the Executive Director of IARPC, the Interagency Arctic Research and Policy Committee. I'm also the Assistant Director for Polar Science in the Office of Science and Technology Policy in the White House. And we're going to tell you a little bit about IARPC and give you an overview of the draft plan with a specific focus today on the priority area 4. And we'll also explain how to submit comments on the plan and provide an opportunity to ask any questions you might have. And first, I guess we want to just open it up and share a few minutes about why this is so important to us. And so as many of you already know, I see a lot of old friends on the call. As many of you already know, I've been doing research all my life since I left my parents' home when I was 18. I've been really fortunate to have this as a pathway for my career, and I just love it. As far as every day is different. Every day we get to do something new, and it's particularly wonderful, really gratifying to work in Arctic science. We've seen the evolution of the science extend so much over the last 30 and 40 years. I think that we really have approached the level of we're not so much looking at individual disciplines or specific small problems, where now we're able to take on these big grand challenges and these big system level science. And it's just so gratifying for me to see the students that I've worked with over the years move into positions of great responsibility, and particularly Katya. I'm so proud of her. Katya was one of our grad students when I was director of the International Arctic Research Center at the University of Alaska, and look at her now. So Katya, would you please jump in here?
Sure. Thank you so much, Larry. Thank you for such a generous welcome. Hello, everyone. I am Katya Kontar, the International Science Lead in the U.S. Global Change Research Program. I recently transitioned into this role. Before it, and while I was working on the Arctic Research Plan, I was a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow at the National Science Foundation, Office of Polar Programs, Arctic Sciences section. And working on the Arctic Research Plan, and especially on this priority area, has been very important to me, not only in terms of my responsibilities at the National Science Foundation, but also personally. My research background is in hazard mitigation and risk reduction, with emphasis on springtime flooding due to ice jams in rural Arctic. And while I was working on my PhD at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, I was very fortunate to work with communities in Alaska and also the Sakha Republic, which is in the eastern Siberia in Russia, which are prone to flooding. And I learned so much from that work. And I witnessed firsthand how devastating disasters can be to rural Arctic, how they impact every aspect of communities' well-being, and also how incredibly resilient and strong people are in those communities. And there is so much knowledge and so much expertise on hazards and risks, and most importantly, on the strategies to prevent, mitigate, and recover from the adverse impacts of disasters. And I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to be part of the author team for this priority area and highlight the research needs to help advance resilience of Arctic communities. I'm excited to introduce this priority area to you today and hear your feedback. So thank you so much for taking the time to join the webinar today.
Thanks, Katya. So next slide, please, Liz. So IARPC is the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee, and we exist to facilitate collaborations, cooperation, and to ensure that there's minimal duplication among federal agencies that are doing research in the Arctic. So we have 16 agencies or departments or offices from across the US government, and we play our role to enhance research on issues that are of priority to all these agencies, or where their missions intersect. So Katya's agency, the U.S. Global Change Research Program, is actually one of our sister agencies within the OSTP, within the Office of Science and Technology Policy. And so we have a great collaboration there. And we also, IARPC also has a really strong relationship, really strong collaboration with our sibling organization, the Arctic Research Commission. So the US ARC, the Arctic Research Commission, and IARPC were both created in 1984 under the Arctic Research and Policy Act. And this act calls for a comprehensive national policy focus on the research needs and objectives in the Arctic. And that's what we're working on today. Our role is to develop the Arctic Research Plan, and it's time to do another one. So next slide, please. So IARPC brings together these federal agencies to coordinate Arctic research. We're organized into several levels of staff and participants. The top level is the principals. And so we have one top level principal or policy level member from the 14 agencies that are responsible for directing US investments in Arctic research. And then we also have representatives from the White House OSTP, Office of Science and Technology Policy, and the Office of Management and Budget. And our principals meet annually to provide policy advice and guidance and directions. And they also provide the guidance with respect to the 5-year Arctic Research Plan. And sometimes direct the agency staff and our secretariat to address particular issues. And so we have had special projects along the way. Next slide, please, Liz. So this is the current Arctic Research Plan that we're currently operating on. And this plan expires in December of this year. And so we have to create a new one. So every 5 years, IARPC creates a new 5-year research plan. This plan is developed along with in consultation with the U.S. Arctic Research Commission, as I mentioned. And we also work with the government of the state of Alaska. We want to make sure that this is appropriate for the state of Alaska and the presidents of the Arctic. We also seek input from the private sector and from public interest groups. So this plan identifies critical areas where Arctic research supports US policy from the community to global scales. And it looks for areas where federal investment can be enhanced through interagency collaboration. And the plan aims to advance knowledge and decision support for the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. It's implemented in part through our IARPC Collaborations website, and hopefully you are all members of IARPC Collaborations. If not, I really encourage you to Google that and join. It's a wonderful mechanism to keep up on the latest and the activities and ongoing efforts in the Arctic. So these plans, these are, as I mentioned, to enhance collaboration among the agencies, among federal agencies. And so these plans, they're focused on the intersection of missions. So they don't attempt to address all Arctic research. And so there's an incredible amount that's done outside of this plan, which is a good thing. And so the current plan, as you see here, was released in December of 2016, and it's focused on the period from 2017 to 2021. And there were 9 goals, as you can see in this image, and if you notice, they're primarily disciplinary goals, except for the center goal, which is environmental intelligence, which is kind of the convergence or the confluence of all of these activities. And there's 4 policy drivers, and we'll come back to that. But we're utilizing the same policy drivers in the current Arctic Research Plan. So next slide, please, Liz. So all of our federal research is driven by or guided by the principles for conducting research in the Arctic. And these principles are to be accountable, to establish effective communications, to respect Indigenous knowledge and cultures, to build and sustain relationships, and to pursue responsible environmental stewardship. And so hopefully all of our researchers, all of our scientists, all of our program managers understand and follow these guidelines. Next slide, please. So this is our timeline for developing the next Arctic Research Plan. And we're currently in the second public review phase of the plan development. So we're on the second column from the right. This phase will last until the public comment period closes on June 11th. So it's coming up real soon. a federal steering group has organized the initial public scoping comment period that began in April of 2020 and closed with a community workshop in September of last year. And starting in November of last year, the federal drafting teams worked on with that information to create the draft plan. And we could not have done it without the input from the Arctic research community. So thank you all for your contributions and your guidance and your input. And hopefully that will continue. And we'll continue to receive comments from you and guidance, because we're still moving forward with the developing how we're going to implement this. And so we still need your input and your ideas and your recommendations. So after the public comment period closes on June 11th, IARPC will review and consider all the input that we've received and revise the plan as appropriate. And we're aiming to release this final plan by the end of this year, by the end of 2021. Next slide, please, Liz. So this illustration is just the framework of what the whole crux of the plan is. And it shows the three main components of the plan, which are the policy drivers, our priority areas, and our foundational activities. This plan structure and approach is quite different from previous plans. The priority areas and the foundational activities are planned or intended to be highly interconnected and matrixed. So the foundational activities relate to and support and inform the priority areas. The foundational activities are critical processes in guiding the federal government's approach to Arctic research and in improving research and collaboration on the priority areas. And the foundational activities are intended to continue past the 5-year timeframe of the individual plans. And we'll talk more about the foundational activities in a bit. The priority areas are cross-cutting foci that were identified as needed additional attention or research. And this was identified through public comments and workshops and outreach. And both the priority areas and the foundational activities will require and benefit from the engagement of our existing IARPC teams that are represented by the collaboration logo in the middle of the graphic. And so this is where all of our teams are going to continue to feed into these priority areas. And so now let's go over some of the elements. So next slide, please, Liz. So as I mentioned previously, we have 4 policy drivers, and it's surprising the US policy in the Arctic has not changed much in the last 50 years. We've had a very stable and consistent policy towards Arctic. And so the policy drivers are well-being, which is to enhance the wellness of Arctic residents, with an emphasis on the themes of cultural vibrancy, economic development, and mental and physiologic health. And then stewardship, which is to advance responsible management of the Arctic environment with an emphasis on globally driven changes. And then the third is the security, which is to strengthen national and regional safety, as well as risk management and emergency preparedness themes. And finally, the Arctic to global systems, which is to improve our understanding of Arctic as a component of the planet Earth. So next, please, Liz. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of the 4 priority areas. So we have 4 priority areas, each which identifies a broad cross-cutting goal, which expresses the intended convergent outcomes that will be realized from these research investments. So for the people who are on the phone, I'm going to read them. So the first is community resilience and health. The second priority area is Arctic system interactions. The third priority area is sustainable economies and livelihoods. And the fourth is risk management and hazard mitigation. So this priority format is a really significant shift from previous plans. This plan takes a really targeted approach to priority areas that will enable IARPC to address the most pressing Arctic research needs that require a collaborative approach. So we're taking the input from the collaboration teams and from other external expertise as needed, and then we'll provide those to direct those to make progress in those priority areas. And so these priority areas are designed to support research challenges that have been identified by the Arctic communities and by federal agencies with a presence in Alaska, and other federal agencies with Arctic investments. And also, of course, as I mentioned previously, the state of Alaska and other non-federal partners. And as I mentioned, this plan does not cover all Arctic research, but focuses on the areas where interagency collaborations and partnerships will increase the value of federal research. And we've really seen that over the last 10 years in the previous Arctic research plans. Bringing together this collaborations really enables us to punch far above our weight and get a lot more out of the research investments. So now let's go into a little more detail on each of those. So next, please. So again, for those on the phone, the goal of priority area 1, community resilience and health, is to improve community resilience and well-being by strengthening research and tools to help us better understand the social, natural, and built systems in the Arctic. Next, please. The goal of priority area 2, Arctic system interactions, is to enhance our ability to observe, understand, predict, and project the Arctic's dynamic interconnected systems and their linkages to the Earth system as a whole. The goal of priority area 3, sustainable economies and livelihoods, is to monitor, maintain, and proactively adapt the Arctic's natural, social, and built systems to promote sustainable economies and livelihoods. I'll ask Katja, would you please provide more detail about priority area 4, please?
Of course, thank you so much, Larry. So priority area 4, risk management and hazard mitigation, is to secure and improve quality of life through an understanding of disaster risk exposure, sensitivity to hazard, and adaptive capacity. Next slide, please. Research on risk exposure, sensitivity to hazards, and adaptive capacity are critical for ensuring safety and security in the Arctic. There is an immediate need for an Arctic research portfolio that builds community resilience and security with the fundamental purpose to provide a good life and well-being for all Arctic communities. Next slide, please. Arctic risk management and hazard mitigation challenges are diverse. These include, but are not limited to, advancing knowledge related to chronic hazards, such as climate change and its impact, ocean acidification, sea level rise, environmental degradation, and coastal erosion. Also acute and episodic events, such as harmful algal blooms, wildfires, shipwrecks, oil spills, and pandemics, and holistic security concerns such as domain awareness, communication fragility, and response capability. The cross-cutting themes of resilience, hazard mitigation, threat reduction, and disaster response management are fundamental in reducing risk. And to be successful, the combined research efforts across federal agencies must address the entire spectrum of concerns from local environment security to national security. Next slide, please. Risk management and hazard mitigation in the Arctic require a balanced research portfolio that provide actionable insights, services, and technology tools that protect communities at the local, state, and national level. Progress will be the result of fundamental and applied research, enhanced monitoring, sustained observations, and predictive modeling. Along with research, there must also be technology development. Development requires needs-driven efforts that look for scientific solutions to address foreseeable risk management and hazard mitigation needs in the near and midterm future. Next slide. And here on this slide, you can see the list of federal departments and agencies, as well as IARPC collaboration teams that align well with the risk management and hazard mitigation priority area. And on the next slide, we would like to emphasize again that the additional partnerships that are needed to advance Arctic hazard mitigation and risk management. These are partnerships that will be critical to advancing understanding of disaster risk, include engineers, emergency managers, and community planners from the state of Alaska, boroughs, and local and tribal governments, as well as the private sector. All these actors play a crucial role in and I would like to also make special emphasis on the private sector, which plays a crucial role in protecting assets, workforce, and supply and distribution chains to help society keep functioning in times of and after disasters. So in addition to interagency collaboration, this collaboration with non-federal partners is also very important. Next slide. And this is my final slide where I would like to emphasize and highlight again that hazards and risk cannot be effectively addressed by any one entity alone. Resilience, hazard mitigation, and disaster management expertise are found across many federal agencies and at many levels. And this priority area seeks to manage and reduce risk by bringing researchers from across different disciplines together with Arctic community members and leaders, indigenous organizations, emergency managers. And it is through collaborative research activities that advancements in prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery can be achieved. And this is all I have for you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katya. So as I mentioned, so there's three main components of the framework of the plan. And the third one is the foundational activities. And so the foundational activities are critically important as far as they permeate or they're integrated across all of our priority areas. And really they're essentially the foundational activities of all Arctic research, of all research in a lot of respects. So this plan identifies 5 foundational activities, which are co-production of knowledge and indigenous-led research, data management, education, monitoring, observing, modeling, and prediction, and finally technology, innovation, and application. And so, as I mentioned earlier, these activities we expect to continue beyond into the future, beyond just the implementation of this 5-year plan, but to be an ongoing permanent activities that need support, need investment, and need engagement. And so we're really excited about this this new approach. Next, please. So implementation. So the implementation section of the draft Arctic Research Plan is really pretty high level. It provides the guidance to IARPC and general measures of success about how we will hold ourselves accountable. So I guess what we're going to do is the plan will be implemented through biennial implementation plans. And so we're already in the process of starting to write or figure out a plan to develop the plan for the first biennial implementation plan, which will aim to align the federal resources and leverage partnerships with the non-federal entities. So as with its predecessor, this plan will be implemented by our 4 new priority area collaboration teams that are open to all interested parties. And these teams will interact and coordinate activities with to reach the plan goals and to ensure coordination and collaboration of resources to address the pressing needs. And these coordination teams will collaborate with existing collaboration teams quite closely to continue be the vital communities of practice that we've established. They will contribute to the objectives of the priority area collaboration teams and may pursue interest in issues outside of the plan. The Arctic Research Plans will not focus on all the work that are being done, but they will try and direct the collaborations and the cooperation directed towards the most urgent research needs that are identified by the state of Alaska, by the residents of the North, and by the Arctic researchers who can best say what's most urgently needed and what's also where our expertise and where our capabilities and what is achievable. And so if you do want to learn more about the implementation, we are still working through that, but if you want to learn more about the implementation, we'll be holding an additional webinar on June 2nd, and we'll go into more depth on our thoughts of the implementation then. So next, please. So this is an illustration of how the federal agencies that are shown on the left will contribute to each of the priority areas. And I want to highlight to you that on the right are the current collaboration teams, and with their anticipated contributions to the priorities that are shown by the connecting lines. And you will notice that there are significant contributions from each of the collaboration teams to each of the priority areas. And we hope that our members of the collaboration teams will see their connections, will see their role in addressing these new priority areas, and not just the collaboration teams, but all the members of the Arctic research community, so that we can get a good engagement, good contributions, and good collaborations established amongst the entire Arctic research community. So this is an opportunity to think broadly across disciplines and to figure out how to contribute and how to really advance the science. Next slide, please. So we are accepting comments on the draft plan through June 11th, and we are specifically looking for comments on the priority area goals, justifications, what we need to do and who the potential partners could be. We want input on the foundational activities, how we should execute those, how they will feed in, how they will be supported. And we also want some recommendations on what our implementation should be and what metrics we should use. So we appreciate all your comments and thoughts on the draft plan. So next, please. Where are we at? So ways to comment. So I just went through the participant list and I don't see anybody on the phone, so I'm not going to read through this. So I encourage you to look at this, scratch this down. You can submit your comments through the Federal Register. You can email your comments to IARPC, or you can leave a voicemail at those phone numbers that are listed there. Or else you can also just shoot a note directly to Robert Delgado, who's at the Office of Polar Programs at NSF, and his address is there. And so there are many opportunities for providing input or providing recommendations. As Liz said at the beginning, these input has to be submitted formally. So we will take notes and we will listen and absorb what you're saying today, but that's not an official submission. And so we encourage you to officially submit your comments through this process, and we will respond to each of those comments. So next, please. So after the comment period closes, the federal agency staff will review and consider the input and revise the plan as appropriate. By law, the revisions have to be done specifically by federal agency employees. We will make all the comments received, submitted through the mechanisms in the Federal Register notice, and the responses publicly available with attribution on the IARPC Collaborations website. And that's what I mean, we will respond to each of them. So we won't respond individually to every response submitted, but we will collect them and respond to them online so you can see how your comments were addressed. And our goal is to have the plan released by later in this year. So next slide, please. I guess we're already there. So if you have questions, please direct them to Nikush Carlo or our secretariat. And also the address is there for at the plan development webpage where you can get the plan and get the downloadable. And so with that, we'll take questions. So I guess we do have, next slide, please, Liz. We do have one more information session, which will be held on June 2nd. So I encourage you to participate then. And that'll be our final webinar for this, for the Arctic Research Plan before the public comment period closes on June 11th. So thank you all very much. Now we'll like to open it up for comments, questions, suggestions.
Thank you, Larry, and thank you, Katya, for presenting. As a reminder to folks, you can put your questions or your comments in the chat box if you prefer to type, or if you would rather ask your questions verbally, you can raise your hand using the reactions button on your toolbar, or *9 if you're on the phone, and we'll do our best to alternate between those two. We do have a question from Mike McCracken. I'll go ahead and read it for everyone. The global climate is on a course to dramatically change the Arctic that has existed for thousands of years, doing so in ways that are directly affecting mid-latitude, I don't know what NH stands for, mid-latitude NH weather and sea level all around the world, and will have effects on migrating species from virtually all latitudes. Is any component of the Arctic interagency research effort going to investigate the potential for starting near-term climate intervention that would have a potential of moderating Arctic amplification of global warming?
And NH is Northern Hemisphere.
Ah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So yes, well, I won't say exactly, we're not exactly focusing on climate engineering or anything like that. However, there is one of the priority areas is Arctic system interactions. And so what that means is essentially is understanding how the components of the Arctic system interact and how they interact with the global climate. And we have to have, before any potential mitigation efforts can be applied, we have to have a good understanding of what's driving the climate, how it responds, and what those potential impacts will be. And so this, I won't say that this priority area is focused on mitigation or responses to ameliorating climate change. However, it is the essential precursor that must be done prior to any such actions. And so there is a great amount of understanding that will come out of this, and some of that understanding will be applied towards potential mitigation activities. There's no doubt about that. And so I think that we really have to understand how these changes are affecting global circulation, how it affects atmospheric dynamics, what it does to oceanic heat transport. And so those are all critical issues. And hopefully we're going to come out of this, this next 5-year period with a far better understanding than we have currently.
I guess I would just say, if I can, that you're going to keep researching until it's too late to do anything useful. And that's sort of a tendency of scientists to do that. And we're going to end up in very dire straits. We're headed to several degrees warming this century at the pace we're going. And if you can't wait until we're far along and expect to reverse the situation for what's happening in Greenland. You can maybe reverse Arctic ice, but can't reverse Greenland or Antarctica. We're going to end up waiting too long. So,
yeah, we have repeatedly acknowledged that that mitigation efforts are needed, and we've also repeatedly said that there is a lot going on that's not defined in this plan. So I agree with you wholeheartedly that there is some very disturbing and concerning trends ongoing, and that action is needed. That action is outside of the scope of this plan, but that does not mean that those actions are not being addressed and are not being implemented through other mechanisms. But I agree with you. I think you're right. I don't have any sort of qualm or disagreement with everything you just said.
I have a question in the chat from Karen Jones. How do you envision the role of space for connectivity and remote sensing? I did not see satellite specifically mentioned in the plan.
Absolutely. Satellites are mentioned. They should be mentioned in the plan. They're clearly a critical component of the observing activities. And so right now, the satellite platforms make up the predominant forms of observing, just because the Arctic is so, it's a very large area. It's very sparsely populated. We have very sparse observation capabilities. The satellite network has provided most of our understanding of the dynamics that are occurring. I won't say most of our understanding. They have provided most of the observational database for understanding how it's changing and what the consequences of the system interactions are. And so through the greening, through the browning of the Arctic, through the sea ice dynamics, all of those are critically important satellite observations.
If I can comment here, Larry,
Please.
on the topic. Yeah, so I think this is very important, but also it seems important that those global observations platforms actually are more connected to regional processes and community processes and community needs. So this is a sort of an alignment that we need to find between community needs and scientific elements, because what sometimes is important, or the focus of science, not necessarily is the focus of community needs. So that alignment, I think, that need to be closed up more more efficiently, probably. But also it is for the benefit of science and the benefit of communities to seek for that alignment.
So I've mentioned several times that this plan is substantially different than previous plans.
Absolutely, I totally
The previous plans were really focused on disciplinary understanding of the physical and biologic process of ecosystem dynamics. And this plan really is focused upon the higher level community needs with respect to the changes that are ongoing and the responses that communities need to address. And so I agree with you. And I think that I really do sincerely believe that this plan will help our communities, will help our northern residents better understand, prepare for future environments, future climates. So I'm 100% with you, and I think that we are now at the position in our scientific history. We're now at the place where we can take on these higher level questions. We couldn't have gotten there if we hadn't had really dedicated researchers over the last many decades working on this understanding of the Arctic processes, so that we can now take this understanding and combine it and merge it through cooperations, through collaborations, to take on these higher level questions that are addressed in priority area 1, 3, and 4. So I'm with you 100%.
Also, just want to note that Javier had noted in the chat specific lines where hazards and mitigation processes are or would be connected to indigenous cultures affected by climate shifts. So just want to make sure we capture that in the notes, and also really encourage, particularly if you have specific line additions, to submit a formal comment so that we can have that on the record.
Yeah, basically, sorry, Liz, I was just making sure that I'm reading the right document, by the way. But,
of course.
But we have, through our interactions with communities, I'm in the University of Alaska Fairbanks. So we are seeing, and I think that probably is already documented, the increasing number of rescue missions, either in the winter or in the summer. And some of those are related to hazards, and flash floods, for example, is one of those. Katia has studied those, but also during winter storms, actually, in areas of the Western Alaska. So, in terms of, it seems very important, because the awareness of climate processes, it is something that has to be embedded within the culture of the people of Alaska, which I know it's been within the tradition, but probably those shift and have, for example, we are seeing in this last winter, we have seen changes in the periodicity in precipitation, but also in extreme precipitation, snow events I'm talking. So I think that there is a closure exercise that need to be done between scientific processes and the probably the cultural shift that will carry on here. Anyway.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
I guess I'll open up, maybe Corey or Amy, or does anybody else want to respond to Javier? No, that's okay.
I mean, I will be feeding comments, but I will find out some more specific elements, and then we will discuss with whoever would like to take on here.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Before I pick up the next question in the chat, just a reminder, you can either put your questions in the chat or raise your hand using the reactions button. And Ash Pandey has a question. Does the priority area number 4 also look into risks posed by increased maritime transport in the Arctic in general and the US Arctic in particular?
Katia, I think they're calling your name.
That would be specifically for me. Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Actually, Liz, if you could get the slides back up, I think that would be helpful if it's not too difficult. Slide 24. So it is a very specific question, very specific risk. So for our priority area, we tried our best to group the risk. So for that specific risk, we would be looking into acute or episodic events. For example, increased maritime shipping could result in possible oil spills, right, or shipwrecks. So that would go under that area. But we do not highlight that exactly. So we just group them. Does that answer your question, Ash?
Can you hear me, Katya?
Yeah.
So good afternoon, Larry. Good afternoon, Liz and Katya, and thanks for a fantastic presentation. I'm a professor at the Massachusetts Maritime Academy and a captain from the Arctic. Have been sailing in ice for a long time, and of course, I strongly feel that that such a fantastic plan that we are trying to put together. I think we should. Mention the risks that that increased maritime transport in the Arctic is actually bringing all over the place. And besides the oil spill and the the disturbance to the marine ecology that ships are going to bring. There are lots of other elements that, of course, I have been researching in, and of course that have been during my own PhD way back in 2016. That actually I could include in comments if you'd like as part of the priority area 4. So because ships, of course, they are bringing in many things. Air pollution, for instance, is something that obviously we need to talk about. The IMO is currently totally confused as to what should be done with air pollution. As you know, we are in a low sulfur regime and so on and so forth. So basically, there are many elements besides the wreck and the pollution that you spoke about, and I strongly believe that we should actually put some of those things in the plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ash. That's very helpful.
I agree. Good comments. Thanks. Please submit it in writing if you could, please.
I will. Thank you.
I see Max Neal has a hand up. Go ahead.
Good morning, all. My name is Max Neal. I'm with the Center for Environmentally Threatened Communities at Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. We support some of the most threatened communities from erosion, flooding, and permafrost thaw to address impacts to community infrastructure. I'm just looking at, so I was late to the conversation and I've just been looking at the draft. One of the barriers that I've seen in past work is kind of a lack of specific prioritization. And I'm just looking through the draft in this section now, and I don't really see some specific priorities. So I've observed with some programs like NSF and NA, the structure of that program is researchers come to the program with their priorities, more or less, and then the program doesn't necessarily have clear priorities for what should be funded. So I think this draft plan here is an opportunity to give research funders priorities to work on. So I would propose that be more clearly identified in here, and specifically climate impacts to infrastructure be a top priority. I don't really see that called out here. So I'm wondering if someone could respond to one, the ability to prioritize some focal areas in this draft, and two, maybe mention how climate impacts to infrastructure is kind of addressed here.
Absolutely. I'll take that, Katya, if you don't mind. So you're absolutely correct, Max, in that the Arctic Research Plan, the draft plan is quite high level. And so what we're going to do is that the implementation plan that we talked about several times, the implementation plan is where we will describe the specific objectives, such as the examples that you provided, the specific objectives that we'll take on for the next 2 years. And so those will drive what happens in the next 2 years. And then those activities may continue on for the biennial period after that. It depends on what progress we make and how we achieve it. And the selection of those specific objectives will be determined by, suggestions such as you just made, by what the communities most need, what the rural communities most need, what the Arctic communities most need, but also what the scientific community is best able to deliver and respond to. And I do agree with you that that is protecting communities from erosion is really a top priority. I think it's one of the most urgent issues we have right now. I think there's a lot of people working on this, and this is where I think IARPC can really be helpful, in that what IARPC has done over the previous two Arctic research plans is they've developed these communities of practice. So researchers that have a common interest have gotten together and focused on specific needs, and working together, they've really produced some great products and made some wonderful deliverables. And I just think we don't have the community of practice that we need to take on those challenges right now. And that's where IARPC can help. So we can set a focus. We can say, this is the topic we're going to work together and bring together the integrative teams to address those issues. And so that's what you're suggesting. We haven't forgotten it. We're not missing it. That's going to be defined in the implementation plan.
Okay.
But again, one more thing. Sorry, we are part of the request in the Federal Register notice is to offer suggestions for implementation, and that would be a wonderful suggestion to go into the Federal Register notice as far as what the implementation should be. So I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, please.
No, thank you very much. So what I'm hearing is in the you'll set some priorities for implementation, and then there will be increased consultation. Like I think it's important that this plan be really driven by the needs of communities. So what I'm hearing is maybe that's a possibility in the future, because I'm not aware of a large engagement with the communities that have been most threatened to develop priorities for hazard mitigation, at least in this draft.
Yes, yeah, you're absolutely right. When the specific objectives are defined and the collaborators are identified and the federal agencies that are going to be supporting it, the federal agencies have a mandate to engage in consultation, so that must be done, that will be done.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Again, if you have additional questions or comments, you can put them in the chat or raise your hand using the raise hand function. I've got a follow-up from Karen Jones saying regarding the comments about satellites. Karen now sees that satellite is mentioned once, but it sounds like the implementation plan will get more into the how and what.
Absolutely. And even though it's only mentioned once in the Arctic research plan, I didn't know that, so thank you for pointing that out. Satellite observations are critically important in just all aspects of Arctic science, and so it will continue to play an important role. And exactly how will be defined in the implementation. Particularly relating back to what Max has talked about, satellite observations of coastal erosion has been hugely important, without a doubt. And that's just one example, one possible example of implementation.
Corey, I see your chat that you can't find the raise hand function, so just go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Liz. My question is about infrastructure, and I apologize if I missed it. I didn't read the updated version yet. But I think a couple weeks ago in a NNA meeting, I think Sherry Fox made a very extremely important comment that Arctic communities are kind of, as we all know, kind of being expected to engage with the Arctic research process. And there's we all know that there's a ton of effort and a lot of funding going towards Arctic research. With COVID-19, that really highlighted the problem of not being able to hire locally. But when she made the comment that folks in the villages are being expected to work together with scientists, but it takes actual building and a staff, and I think we all know that's very extremely limited in the Arctic, with obviously with Kagavik being one of the only main places that has a campus that's locally owned. With the big infrastructure bill and all that discussion going on, has IARPC considered I should back up a little bit. So we all know that Arctic research also kind of stays away from investing too much into infrastructure where they're going to be liable for continuing to pay for it into the future. Have you guys seen any comments coming in or from folks talking about that problem of not being able to find ways to invest in the infrastructure to be able to provide that local support or that local co-production of knowledge, because I think what we've seen in the last 5 years or so is that expecting the local entities that are existing right now to take on that, it's just the capacity is not there. So has that been a consideration behind the scenes? Or I guess my question is, have you seen comments coming in saying that we need to find a way to fund this infrastructure that's needed across the Arctic? Because obviously the few places that do have the infrastructure were able to continue the research in the COVID situation.
I have not reviewed the comments on the Federal Register notice yet, but we have heard this previously in other conversations, Corey. So you're right, and that is understood that's an issue. But still, I think it would be a good idea to formally submit that into the Federal Register notice if you haven't already, if you don't mind. The other thing I'll say is that IARPC, we don't have any money. So we don't direct the investments. The investments come from the federal agencies. And so what that type of activity, IARPC can put this forward as a priority and say that it needs to be done. But those types of investments have to come either through a congressional appropriation or a federal agency investment. And you are right. It's the agencies are really, really hesitant to invest in infrastructure. And Livelihoods is one of the few places where that does exist, not only in the Bureau Arctic Research Consortium, BARC, but also in the DOE facilities and the NOAA facilities. And so we are fortunate to have a good capability there. And I would really like to see something like that, similar investments go on elsewhere. And so I think the only way we're going to see that happen is if we get the community calling for those investments and say that is needed. So I really do encourage you to make those recommendations, make those suggestions. Although I can't tell you to contact Congress. I didn't say that. That's not what I meant. Just put in a Federal Register notice to me.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. And I just see all this money get invested in this big infrastructure bill, and I think that IARPC is in a good position if it was an organized way to let them know that might be a good place to spend some of that money.
Yeah, I agree. It's a good suggestion. Thanks.
I also see a comment in the chat from Renee Crane at NSF saying she appreciates Corey's point and that NSF is interested in more opportunities to work with people in communities around the Arctic. Many new connections developed because of COVID when researchers couldn't travel. And it's a good point about expanding these long-term connections and investment in local researchers and organizations.
And I got to say, NSF has been a great supporter of investments in Arctic research over the years. So we do definitely acknowledge and appreciate the funds that they have addressed there. So thanks for that.
We have about 2 minutes left in our session. Are there any final questions or comments? Or Larry or Katya, do you have any additional statements or information you'd like to share?
Katya, why don't you go ahead? Anything?
I don't really have anything to add. I just would like to thank everyone for joining the webinar today. And please submit, if you have additional comments, please submit them so we can consider them in the future. Okay.
And that's what I was going to say too. So this plan, it really has developed through the wisdom of the group, and these ideas where we can pull together the good input from everybody and reconcile all of the needs with our capabilities and expertise so we can move forward to address the most urgent needs. That's where we're going to come out the strongest. And so your ideas, I'm sincere, your ideas are welcomed and encouraged because we want to do the best job we can with this plan. So please read the plan. And if you have thoughts, if you have direction, if you have guidance, give it to us. So with that, I'll thank you all for joining us. Thank Liz for coordination. Thank Katya for help leading the conversation today. And don't hesitate to contact us if you have further questions. So thanks all.
Thank you all. And I'll just add that this webinar has been recorded and will be posted on the event page and on our YouTube channel. Put the links in the chat in the next couple of days. So if you missed part of it or want to share it with colleagues, you will be able to do that. So thank you very much for joining us and have a great day.
Thank you all.